So the talk is given by Beata, Grzyb, Stefan Frank, Gabriella Vigliocco from the University of London and Radboud University. Stefan is from there, and the title is Predictive Power of Surprisal and Multimodal Language Cues. So take it away.
Okay, hello everyone. As it was said before, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our work on predictive power of surprisal for multimodal language cues, and this work has been conducted together with Stefan and Gabriella Vigliocco. So the ecology of language use is face-to-face. So children learn language in interaction with their caregivers. Adults use language mostly in face-to-face contexts. So in this context, speakers dynamically modify their communicative behaviors. So for instance, they can use prosodic modulations, they can use points, object manipulations, and gestures. So here in this work, we focus on changes in prosody in word durations, as well as iconic gestures. Gestures that represent reference by, for example, depicting some aspects of their shape or a manipulation. Speakers often modulate the duration of the words, and I just selected some examples from our corpus. This is from the child-directed language.
This one is a bison.
You can see the pronounced word of the bison. This is from...
I guess that's a mangosteen, and a mangosteen is the one.
So you can hear here that the words are prolonged and more pronounced. But interestingly, speakers also often accompany their speech with hand gestures, such as iconic gestures. These gestures are imagistically linked to the properties of reference, and they can be often seen when speakers talk to their children or to other adults. And let me...
Saxophone. How does it go?
So this is one example from our child-directed language, and this is another example.
I think it's quite similar to the accordion in that sense, that it's a wind instrument with like not keys, like with like keyboard keys.
Right, right.
So there is a long-standing debate whether these prosodic modulations play a role for the listener or for the speaker. Some researchers have argued here that speakers use prosodic modulations primarily to overcome production difficulties. So here, shortening words in more predictable contexts would come about because predictable words are activated more quickly and therefore produced more easily than less predictable words. Other researchers have argued that prosodic modulations are used primarily or in addition at the service of communication to support the comprehender in processing speech. So here in this view, speakers hyper-articulate unpredictable words in order to improve listeners' chances of comprehending words that they have low expectations for. They also shorten more predictable words as they are easy to process and thus increasing communication efficiency. Similarly, researchers have been investigating the role of modifications in gesture area. So here, some researchers have argued that gestures serve a role for the speaker. So gesture production here may facilitate speech formulation processes through decreasing cognitive load, for example, priming conceptual information, activating information, or maintaining the activation of special information. And finally, preparing and structuring information for speaking. Gestures also can have an important function for the listeners. They can help listeners to disambiguate the meaning of words, and they also support the processing of less predictable words. There is a consensus that caregivers' output to young children is an extreme case of listener-oriented modifications of speech. So here, child-directed language for many years have been considered as a type of hyperspeech. It's characterized by a slower speaking rate, longer word duration, and higher pitch. Child-directed, many studies have demonstrated that prosodic exaggerations here, they accommodate the communicative needs of children and facilitate language comprehension and learning. And similarly, iconic gestures have been shown to support conceptual and language development of children. They support children by bringing to the mind's eye properties of objects that are absent in the environment. So speakers' language modulations are for the sake of the listeners, at least in child-directed language. When we focus on word predictability for the comprehender, for the listener, both prosodic modulations and iconic gestures may support a listener's processing of unpredictable words. Indeed, there is ample evidence showing that processing language is prediction-based. Human language is incremental and predictive. For example, eye gaze are directed usually in anticipation for the words. 96% of iconic gestures starts before their lexical affiliates. And unpredictability of words is a major cause of processing difficulty in language comprehension. And finally, some new studies point towards predictive processing as a medium to support word recognition and facilitate early word learning in children, as well as support early cognitive development more generally. There are a few studies that examine the link between word predictability and word duration in adults. And only one study examined word predictability and word duration in caregiver speech to pre-linguistic infants. There are no studies for older children or children who are able to speak. And importantly, there are also no studies looking at word predictability effects on iconic gesture presence. So in this study, we have built the language models based on child-directed and adult-directed language. And then we assessed how word predictability correlates with speakers' prosodic modulations and iconic gesture production in naturalistic caregiver-child and adult-adult dyadic interactions. So here, the predictability of a word in a given context can be expressed in terms of surprisal. It's an information theoretic measure of how unexpected the word is given its prior linguistic context. Surprisal before has been shown to reliably predict word reading times in sentences, as well as word fixation time in eye tracking studies. And recent studies have shown a link between words predictability in context and word duration in adult-to-adult conversational speech, showing that low surprisal words have shorter duration than high surprisal words that are unexpected. So here in the study, we hypothesized that speakers produce multimodal behaviors to support comprehenders, child or adult, predictive processing mechanism. If this is the case, we should find that speakers prolong words that are harder to predict, either from the perspective of a child or an adult comprehender. Because prosodic modulations are generally more prominent in child-directed language, here we expect a larger effect of surprisal on word duration in child-directed language than as compared to adult-directed language. And similarly, we should find that iconic gestures are more likely when upcoming speech is harder to predict for a child or adult comprehender. So here we have used recurrent neural network language models. We have trained two different models. We trained CDL-based models, is model based on child-directed language, on sentences extracted from the child corpus. We use here 42 different data sets when the speech was targeted to children aged between 6 months up to 5 years of age. And similarly, we have trained a model based on adult-directed language, and here we used sentences extracted from the spoken BNC corpus. And here we tested the models predictability in naturalistic corpus. So here we use the ECOLANG corpus of multimodal communication that is currently under development in Vigliocco's laboratory. So in this experiment, in each of the session, participants were asked to talk about objects provided by the experimenters, interacting in a natural way as they usually do. Each dyad was asked to talk about the object. It could be set of animals, tools, foods, and musical instruments in two conditions: when the objects were physically present in the environment and when they were absent. And for this study, we have extracted data from 30 caregiver child dyads and 30 adult dyads. We have transcribed speech manually by utterance. Then we used automatic alignment, MFA and mouse, to segment and align transcribed speech to the corresponding audio at the word level. Then we corrected the automatic alignment manually. Then we also annotated the caregivers and the speakers' behaviors manually for a representation of iconic gestures. That is gestures that represent an action or an object. Similarly, we coded also lexical affiliates. These are all the words that correspond most closely to a gesture in meaning. And here we constrained the lexical affiliates to a minimum of words. And sometimes it was not possible to choose a specific lexical affiliates, as this is because some gestures are not accompanied by lexical affiliates. What we have done subsequently, we extracted, so each of the sentence from ECOLANG child or ECOLANG adult was passed through the language models, and we extracted surprisal measures. So here is an example for the teddy bear. So we basically fed each of the words from the sentence into the recurrent neural network, and then we calculated the surprisal value here for the bear. We have done in parallel the same for our adult data set. And here all the words were passed through the adult-based language model. And we fit a linear mixed effect regression models where the dependent variable was observed word duration in milliseconds. To eliminate effect of other factors that we know that influence spoken word durations in general, we entered the following control variables. So we entered baseline word duration obtained from the Mary text-to-speech system. We entered word log frequency age of acquisition, and finally, word position in the sentence. That was a categorical variable. And here we had the initial position, medial, final, and then isolations that are single word utterances. And we also entered the session, which basically meant whether the, yes? Do you have a question? 5 minutes, really? Okay. So here we included by subject random intercepts that would account for individual differences in speaking rate, and by subject random slopes for surprisal measures to account for individual differences in sensitivity to surprisal. And so here, as expected and in line with existing findings, we found effects of word frequency and word position in the utterances. And we found that speakers reduce more frequent words, as well as words that are acquired later in development. And they prolong words that are in isolation and at the end of sentence. More importantly, when controlling for all these factors, we found a significant positive effect of surprisal on word duration. So we found that speakers do modulate word durations based on their own estimates of which words are more or less surprising for the comprehender. This is either the child or an adult. So here, these figures show predicted durations based on standardized surprisal measures. You can see here that high surprisal words have longer durations, and that's true for both child-directed and adult-directed language. As for the iconic gestures, we focus our analysis only on the subset of words. This is because not all of the words can be represented by a gesture. And to this end, we have selected only words that were accompanied by a presentational gesture at least once in our ECOLANG corpus. And again, all of the words were passed through the language models to extract surprisal values separately for ECOLANG child and ECOLANG adult datasets. And here we fit logistic miseffects regression models, where the dependent variable was the presence of iconic gesture for a word. The model included the word surprisal values, as well as the control variables, such as word frequency, age of acquisition, and word position in the utterance. We included by subject random intercepts to account for individual differences in the number of iconic gestures, and by subject random slopes for surprisal measures. In addition, we included by word type random intercepts to account for different levels of gesturability of the object, and by word type slopes for surprisal measures to account for object differences in surprisal measures. And again, here is the results for our iconic gestures. We can see that the surprisal again has a significant positive effect of surprise on the probability of the gesture. Words in unpredictable contexts have higher probability of being accompanied by a gesture. And this is true for both child-directed and adult-directed language. Again, I show here how predicted probability of the gesture based on standardized surprisal measures for both our child-directed and adult-directed data sets. And here, high surprisal words have higher probability of a gesture. And just to summarize quickly, so speakers do modulate their communication depending on how surprisal words are. The relationship between words duration and surprisal are similar in child-directed and adult-directed language. Most surprising words have longer durations. The relationship between gesture and surprisal are similar in child-directed and adult-directed language, with more surprising words having more chances to be accompanied by an iconic gesture. And just to conclude, speakers do seem to adapt their multimodal communication on the fly to prediction difficulty from the perspective of a child and of an adult, suggesting that the production system is optimized for communicative success. And we found similar effects in child and adult-directed language, suggesting that adaptation to listeners' online predictions may be a general mechanism in language use. And thank you so much, and sorry for rushing.